I lost a 10-year friendship over 4 words in a group chat. Not because of what I said, because of the habit behind it, a habit I'd been running on autopilot for years without ever once questioning it. And the worst part, that wasn't even the most expensive habit I had. There were 6 more, and the 7th one cost me something I still haven't fully gotten back.
Here's the thing nobody tells you about self-sabotage. It never feels like self-sabotage while it's happening. It feels like protecting yourself, being efficient, being real. It's only afterward, when the friendship's gone, when the opportunity's closed, when you're sitting alone replaying the tape, that you realize you did this to yourself, one small habit at a time. What makes it worse is how invisible the pattern is from the inside. Nobody wakes up and decides to ruin something they care about. It happens in increments so small they never register as decisions at all, until one day the damage is too big to explain away as bad luck. The Stoics figured this out 2,000 years before psychology had a word for it. They called it living according to reason instead of impulse. I call it the hardest mirror I've ever had to look into, because it meant admitting that most of what I'd blamed on other people, on timing, on circumstance, actually traced back to choices I'd made without ever examining them. That's an uncomfortable thing to sit with. It's also the only thing that actually changes anything. So today, I'm walking you through the 7 habits that quietly wrecked parts of my life, in the order I lost things, and exactly how Stoic philosophy pulled me out of each one. Stay with me, because the 3rd one is the one most people don't see coming until it's too late, and the 7th one is the one underneath all the others, the one that made every single habit on this list possible in the first place. And if this hits something in you, subscribing is the one favor that keeps this channel alive. Let's start where it started for me, a group chat at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday. The first thing I lost was trust, and it started with complaining. Not dramatic complaining, small stuff. A coworker didn't pull their weight, so I'd vent about it. My friend was always late, so I'd bring it up again and again to anyone who'd listen. It felt harmless, even bonding. What I didn't realize was that every complaint I voiced was a rehearsal, training my brain to scan for what's wrong instead of what's within my control. Epictetus warned about exactly this. He said, "We suffer not from what happens to us, but from our judgment about it." And complaining is that judgment, spoken out loud, on repeat, until it becomes the only lens you own. Marcus Aurelius flipped it entirely. He wrote that the obstacle in the path becomes the path itself, that friction is fuel if you use it right. I wasn't using it right. I was just leaking frustration into every room I walked into, and slowly people started walking into fewer rooms with me. But complaining wasn't the habit that ended the friendship. That one was still 3 habits away. The second thing I lost was my own clarity, and validation seeking is what took it. After a while, I noticed I wasn't doing things because I wanted to. I was doing them to see how people would react. Posting, achieving, even helping, all of it quietly rerouted through the question, will this make people see me the way I want to be seen? Epictetus opens his philosophy with a single dividing line. Some things are up to us, some things are not. Other people's opinions sit firmly on the side that isn't. Chasing something you can never fully control guarantees a low-grade, permanent anxiety, and I had it for years without naming it. The fix wasn't ignoring people. It was building an internal compass strong enough that external noise stopped steering the wheel. But even that wasn't the habit that started the countdown to losing my friend. That one shows up next, and it's the one that quietly poisons everything before anyone notices. The 3rd thing, the one most people never catch in themselves, was over-promising. I said yes to everything. Yes, I'll be there. Yes, I've got this handled. Yes, don't worry about it. It felt generous in the moment,
What it actually was a slow erosion of my own word. Seneca argued that character isn't revealed in grand gestures, it's revealed in the small, consistent things you follow through on. Every broken promise, even the tiny ones, chips away at how much people trust you, and eventually at how much you trust yourself. I didn't notice the pattern until a friend pointed out, flatly, that she'd stopped counting on me for anything real. That stung more than any argument could have, because it meant the damage had already been done, quietly, over months, before either of us said a word about it out loud. And that quiet damage is exactly what set up the fourth habit, the one that turned a crack into a break. When she finally brought it up, when she said directly that she felt like she couldn't rely on me anymore, I got defensive, instantly. I explained, I justified, I listed reasons why it wasn't really my fault. I wasn't listening, I was surviving the conversation. Marcus Aurelius wrote that if someone could prove him wrong, he'd gladly change his mind because he was after the truth, not the comfort of being right. I wasn't after truth in that moment. I was protecting my ego, and she felt it. People stop giving you honest feedback the moment every honest word turns into an argument, and that's exactly what happened. She stopped trying, and 4 words in a group chat later, that friendship quietly ended, not with a fight, but with silence. I told you that was the most expensive habit. It wasn't. Losing her hurt, but what came after hurt longer, because I didn't stop there. I kept comparing myself to everyone who still had what I'd just lost. Easy friendships, effortless trust, people who seemed to have this figured out. Every scroll through a feed became a scoreboard I was losing. What I was actually doing was measuring my entire complicated behind-the-scenes life against everyone else's curated highlight reel, a rigged game from the start. Epictetus was blunt about this too, trying to control things outside your power, including how your life stacks up against someone else's, guarantees frustration every time, with no exceptions. Marcus Aurelius redirected his own attention constantly back to his own duties, his own race, instead of speculating about anyone else's. I hadn't learned that yet. So instead of processing what I'd actually lost, I spiraled into resenting people who hadn't lost anything at all. Which is exactly why the 6th habit found such easy ground. I wanted the ache to disappear fast, so I chased anything that promised instant relief, distraction, validation, quick wins that felt like progress but weren't. We live in a world engineered for instant everything, and it trains you to expect immediate results even in the areas of life that flatly refuse to give them: grief, trust, character. Every time something required patience, I abandoned it for whatever promised a faster payoff. Seneca measured a life not by its length or its ease, but how deliberately it was used, and I was using mine carelessly, grabbing at shortcuts for a wound that needed time, not speed. Nothing I grabbed actually closed the gap. It just delayed the moment I'd eventually have to sit still and feel it.
And sitting still was exactly the thing I'd spent years avoiding, which brings me to the 7th habit. The one underneath all the others, the one I didn't even know was a habit until I ran out of ways to dodge it. I never sat alone with my own thoughts. Every quiet moment got filled, a podcast, a scroll, a show playing in the background while I fell asleep, anything to avoid the silence where I'd actually have to look at myself honestly. Marcus Aurelius wrote his private reflections, what we now call meditations, specifically as a space to examine his own behavior away from the noise of the world. That habit of quiet self-examination wasn't a side note to his philosophy, it was the engine underneath all of it. Without it, nothing else changes, because you never actually stop long enough to see the pattern you're repeating. The night I finally sat in silence, no phone, no noise, and asked myself honestly why I'd lost that friendship, all 6 habits lined up in front of me at once. Complaining that pushed people to keep their distance, validation seeking that hollowed out my own compass, broken promises that quietly bled trust, defensiveness that shut down the one honest conversation that could have saved things, comparison that turned grief into resentment, shortcuts that let me avoid feeling any of it long enough to actually learn from it. None of these habits are rare. That's what makes them dangerous. They're common enough to feel normal, small enough to feel harmless, and quiet enough that you won't notice the cost until something you actually cared about is gone. The Stoics never promised a life free of loss. What they promised was this: you always retain control over your judgments, your responses, your character, no matter what circumstances take from you. That's not a comforting bedtime idea, it's a demanding daily practice. Catch the complaint before it leaves your mouth and ask what you can actually do instead. Notice when you're chasing approval instead of building an internal compass. Say no before you say a yes you can't keep. Sit with criticism long enough to find the truth inside it before you defend yourself. Redirect comparison back to your own race. Choose patience over shortcuts, even when patience is uncomfortable. And build in real, unfilled silence on purpose regularly so you can actually see yourself clearly enough to change. I never got that friendship back, not fully. There was an apology, eventually, and a few polite conversations after that, but the easy trust we'd had for a decade never fully returned. And I've made peace with the fact that some doors close for good, no matter how much later wisdom you show up with. That's a harder truth than most self-improvement content wants to admit. Growth doesn't always undo the damage. Sometimes it just means the next decade goes differently than the last one did. But I did get something else out of it. A version of myself who catches these patterns now, usually before they cost me anything real. I complain less, and when I do, I catch it fast enough to redirect it into something useful. I've stopped outsourcing my sense of worth to people who were never going to hold it carefully. I say no more often than I used to, and the yeses I do give actually mean something now. I sit with criticism instead of swinging back at it. I've mostly stopped comparing my full, messy life to everyone else's edited version of theirs. And I no longer treat silence like something to escape. I've learned to use it deliberately, the way Marcus Aurelius did, as the one place where you can actually see yourself without distortion. That's the whole trade the Stoics are offering you. Not a painless life, a clear-eyed one. They never claimed you'd avoid loss. They claimed you'd stop manufacturing losses you didn't have to have through habits so small and so common that almost nobody thinks to examine them until something you actually cared about is already gone. If you recognized even one of these 7 habits in yourself while watching this, that recognition is the entire turning point, the same one that changed everything for me. Sitting alone, no noise, finally willing to look. Check out the video on your screen next, because the habit I almost didn't include on this list turned out to be the one doing the most damage of all.